The Witcher 3 is one of those games that really never gets old. Even after hundreds of hours, there are still strange paths, hidden corners, locked off quest areas, and places that feel like they were meant to be forgotten. So after your overwhelming support, I put together this long collection of my Witcher 3 exploration videos. Some inbounds, some out of bounds, hidden locations, and strange places the game doesn't always expect you to see. I wanted this to not only be a video for active watching, but also something you can study to, leave on in the background, or fall asleep to if you just want a few hours of Witcher atmosphere. Maybe you're like me and the idea of spawning boats out of thin air to clip into hidden areas brings you ultimate inner peace. So settle in. We're going back in time to revisit some of my best discoveries while exploring this game that just keeps on giving. I'll pop in occasionally with some light commentary, but I'll leave it to past me for the most part. We're kicking things off with the exploration that started it all. After completing yet another playthrough of The Witcher 3, I'd noticed just how much time you spend in Novigrad, and more specifically, how many quests tie into the underground sewers or tunnel networks. Once leaving Novigrad to progress the story, however, many players, myself included, completely forget about these tunnels or miss out on parts of them altogether. So I set out to see just how much of Novigrad's underbelly you can explore after it's all said and done, and what there might be to find down there when doing so. To find out, here is Brock from 6 months ago to explain. I wanted to start things off with the location that is both the easiest in terms of accessibility and also the most useful and common amongst serious players. At the northwest end of the city, also known as Temple Isle, you'll see these stairs that lead down to the lower level toward the cliffside. Speaking of the cliffside, we need to descend it somehow. You can either jump off and do it the fun way while also taking in a bit of the view, or you can do it the boring way by continuing to walk north along the edge until you find some obvious rocks to hop down and a trail that leads you to this cave opening. Once inside, we can see this cave is really large and that it obviously has been inhabited or used at some point because of all the braziers. Once we get to the main cavern, we see this stone fountain and 2 pathways on either side. If we turn right, we can see these strange bioluminescent vines and, oddly enough, a body of water. Of course, we jump in and swim to the other side, where we are met with some extremely flammable gas and a chest full of goods. Checking out the left side now, we see even more of those vines and overall just some really strange plants growing on all sides. Oh yeah, remember that flammable gas I talked about? Me neither. Next, we walk into a strange room with a stone sign with the ominous message, "Look to the depths to be lifted up." It makes a lot more sense when we see these human statues surrounding a well of water. After pulling all the levers to make them face the middle, we can jump in and grab some Catskill Witcher gear. I never needed a YouTube tutorial to find those, that's for sure. Back to the middle of the main cavern and past the fountain, we can see 2 larger human statues on either side of a staircase. The one on the left must have also found the flammable gas. Continuing straight ahead, we stroll into this extremely well-equipped laboratory/library with even more gear and the statue of a human with their trusty cat. This place is surprisingly organized and well lit, leading us to believe that it actually isn't as abandoned as it seems. This cave system is a really atmospheric and useful place to visit, and you can do it anytime with ease. I really like the tie-ins with the cat skull and the puzzle it includes. That's about it for this location, so let's head to a more obscure one. As the title implies, this next area is right outside the Glory Gate entrance to the city and is actually tied to an important quest line. When trying to enter the Putrid Grove during the Pyres of Novigrad quest, you can either follow a thief or ask some beggars to get intel on how to get in. But, unbeknownst to me of course, there was actually a third way to get there this whole time. Xlatalis has a great video on this quest option specifically that I will link below. In our case, we're going to hop off this path at this point and swim under the last archway. Once climbing up and through a couple gates, we find ourselves in a passageway. There's actually quite a bit of storage and signs of life down here, including these lovely little guys who jumped me out of nowhere. After dealing with that, and then continuing on into this larger room, we can once again see that it's actually in somewhat decent shape. Our fun is then quickly ruined by this locked door. The key for this door is long gone, since the quest was done hours ago. Oh no, you might be saying. So that's it? We can't see any further? You made this video for nothing and sat here confused for 30 minutes? That last part stung a little bit, but I'm delighted to let you know that there's still another way to access this area. If we walk through Glory Gate and then a little further, we can find this familiar door and give it a knock to once again enter the Putrid Grove. I actually thought it was pretty cool that you could still walk around this area too. If we walk to the left for a while and through this door, we find ourselves in this storehouse, where if we walk to the back of the room, we can drop down this trap door. Here we can see all the goodies that the suspicious people of Novigrad are hiding, along with that door we were stuck behind earlier. So, with some reverse engineering, we can recreate this entire alternate path into the Putrid Grove, which in my opinion is a cool detail. If you open this door during the quest, it will still be open for you now, so you don't need to do all that last part. Unless you really like the Putrid Grove for some reason. This next set of tunnels takes us right through the heart of the city and just past Hierarch Square. We are of course headed to our good friend Happen's bathhouse. He does all the work around here at least. After entering the bathhouse and ignoring the very inviting tubs, we head straight for the last room. Conveniently, and for some odd reason, the trapdoor inside the bath from Count Reuven's treasure quest is still open. Once we jump down, we find it exactly how we left it, and best of all, we get to visit our old friend Bart.
He, go, he, go, he, go.
We can see the pipe that Dandelion blew up to steal the treasure and step into the sewer system. After drinking Golden Oriole, of course, I promise I definitely remembered. These tunnels look and sound ominous, but shockingly, nothing jumps out at us. We can see these mushrooms partially responsible for the noxious gas before stepping into this large main room where I distinctly remember chasing down a certain blind sorceress. Sadly, the upstairs door is locked. It's not like it leads to anything anyways. But the lower level door is wide open. Continuing down the tunnel, we step outside into Novigrad Harbor, no doubt where Dandelion loaded the treasure before making his getaway. It's actually pretty neat to see this city and some lesser seen views from this angle, so I highly recommend coming to give this tunnel and Bart another visit. On to yet another more obscure one next. This next location I only learned about in one of my later playthroughs. It's anything but obvious to find. After walking across the Southern Gate Bridge and under the archway, we're going to turn right just before entering the city and through this inconspicuous door. We find ourselves in this hallway that might belong to Redania, not sure, before stepping into one of the towers. I was curious, so I climbed to the top, and up there you can get an obstructed but still interesting view of the city. This is a video about the underground though, so we climb all the way back down and then drop into the tunnel. We immediately see two paths, which will be somewhat important later. Going right first, we walk through long corridors with collapsed sections before reaching... oh no, a locked door. Surely there's no way to get to the other side. Just wait a minute. Continuing on for a while and then turning right, we are met with another crossroads. Down the right path is just a dead end, but straight ahead is an exit that leads us into the Bits, not far from where Triss was staying. It's so interesting to see where these tunnels are going to randomly pop out at, and it really gets you thinking from a lore standpoint as to what they're used for. If we head back into the tunnel and then go directly straight and follow the path for a while, we reach a couple of weak walls that we can knock down. Luckily nothing caves in, and we emerge into this room with a familiar statue of a robed figure along with a hooded man who is trying to rob a grave. Yep, you heard that right. This is a part of the quest A Tome Entombed, and it's one that I definitely did not know about on my first few playthroughs. Once opening the tomb to look for what he wants, we find a man sleeping inside. As I'm sure you know, this is not normal behavior, and after opening the tomb a second time, the man is revealed to be a catachan. Once we deal with that, we can get a better view of the room, which, like the first tunnels, also has those glowing vines. Sadly, the other entrance is blocked, so we have to head back the way we came. Remember those doors that were locked? We're actually on the other side of them now, so it turns out they're pretty pointless. These tunnels are some of my favorites because of how they pop up in such a random area, and of course because of the hilarious quests that you can stumble upon. Please check them out if you haven't already. Let's move on to my favorite discovery of the video. So, this next location was actually the inspiration for this whole video. I was at the Kingfisher with Triss's final quest Now or Never in mind. After looking around the whole pub, I couldn't find the secret passage that the mages used on that night to hide from the witch hunters and ultimately escape Novigrad. I was a little disappointed. I thought it would be cool to revisit that area and take a closer look since the quest is so rushed. That's when I got an idea. So I immediately headed to the harbor, and wouldn't you know it, right next to this long dock is a large opening which leads into some familiar territory. Right ahead, we can find the area where I believe Triss and Geralt fought the catachan. If we keep going, we find this room full of blocked grates, barrels, and lucky for us, an unlocked door. In this next large room, our luck runs out and we can't go further. Thanks for watching. Is what I would say if you couldn't just walk right past it to this area that actually has a fire going and some beds surrounding it. If we open the map, we can see this window look straight out into Hierarch Square, which is super cool. I'm curious what it looks like from the outside now. We keep progressing through this unlocked door, and look at that, we're past the roadblock. We see the bodies of the catachan victims lying about before entering this room with the large staircase. Once we climb up, we pass through unlocked door after unlocked door before stumbling upon this hole in the wall. This is of course the ancient library that you find with Triss, but understandably, during the quest you're in too much of a rush to take a good look around. I highly encourage you to come check this out on your own. On the other side of the library, we keep walking down the tunnels where we can find a hidden chest that I can't remember for the life of me what was inside, before, at last, we enter the Holy Grail. Right up this staircase is a blocked wall, and on the other side is the Kingfisher. Even the music changes when you're next to it. Of course, we can also take a look around downstairs where the mages were staying before Geralt and Triss moved them to the harbor to escape. The sense of accomplishment when finding this on my own was a great feeling. Even if I wasn't the first, it was really cool to be able to have such liberty while exploring, and to retrace your steps through some of the most memorable quests in the game. Next is another exploration that was driven by a question I had had for a long time. As a novel reader and Yennefer fan, one of my personal favorite quests in the game is The Last Wish. The climax, no pun intended, of her and Geralt's relationship and the event that decided their future. The location of this quest starts in mainland Skellige, but eventually ends up on a remote mountaintop as Geralt and Yennefer search a shipwreck caused by a powerful Djinn. It's a stunning area, with views of the Isles and a unique perspective that you really never get again throughout the rest of the game. Like the tunnels, I was curious if you could somehow return here to see what remains after the main quest. Now, here's something you may not have known. In my early YouTube days, I didn't have a PC. I recorded and played everything via GeForce Now, which ruled out using mods or any real easy solutions. In a way, this made for a much more entertaining and satisfying exploration, so tag along as we take a look at how I managed to once again find the ship despite all these barriers. Naturally, there was only one foreseeable way to pinpoint where the ship is located in relation to the rest of the map. I reloaded a previous save and made my way to the area. Seeing Yennefer again and reliving the moment made me really want to just cave and play the whole quest over again. But no, we have a job to do. When we take a look at the map, we get some less than stellar news. The boat is way east of Kaer Trolde and in the middle of absolutely nowhere, atop what looks to be one of the tallest mountain ranges in Skellige. No markers, not even any question marks, completely remote. This is further shown as we take a look around the edge of the mountaintop. In most places, the angle is so steep that you can't even see the mountain. And after this first look, it was really starting to feel like I was biting off more than I could chew. It was time to get creative, which led me to my first thought. What about approaching this from another, more unique angle? With that in mind, I booted up my current save and went straight to Kaer Trolde Harbor. When checking the map, I noticed that just to the northeast of where the ship was supposedly sitting, there was actually a named location, the Ancient Crypt. So naturally, the idea was to jump aboard a boat and sail to the general area to see what our options may be. After hitting the open waters and running from a swarm of sirens, I was starting to gain some confidence again. Surely there's going to be a way to climb up. I mean, that would only make sense. CDPR's map design is top. Okay. Yeah, so Geralt would need to start moving like the ice climbers if we're going to get up that slope. Let's not count him out yet, right? I mean, he's called the White Wolf for a reason. And that reason clearly has nothing to do with walking in any sort of snow or ice. Okay, so this clearly wasn't going to work. Strike one, book it, shake it off, on to the next. Fun fact about me, I always have a backup plan. And in this case, that meant heading to the middle of Ard Skellige to another named location called the Miners' Field. Sitting to the north of the field, there seems to be quite a big structure nestled in the base of the mountain range. This may be easier than I thought. Even this Cyclops was excited. Hey, let's not push it, big guy. The ride to the location is serene. Deer run free, the sun peeks through the trees, the mountain air is crisp. There was even this misty pond that I had no idea existed. Everything was looking up. Literally. That is, until we arrived at the place. So yeah, maybe there's an elemental who hits like a 2004 Ford F-350 in a school zone. But, oh yeah, and two gargoyles that move like Prine Ornstein and Smo. But once that was all taken care of, things weren't looking half bad. Taking a look back down where we were earlier, though, that was never going to work. There are so many things to jump on and get a head start from here. And look, right off the bat, we're able to make great progress. Okay, all jokes aside, we were able to jump up this patch of soft snow to make some decent altitude progress. Hell, we might even be a third of the way there already. I may have spoke too soon though, as past a certain point, the rocks looked a little too vertical for our liking, and Geralt decided now was the time for his Olympic tryout. Another fun fact about me, I'd never have a backup to the backup plan. We're not out of hope yet, though. We have more angles to try. So I did what I do best and threw Geralt at the mountain, hoping something or someone would stick eventually and we could make it to another checkpoint. After a few minutes, this was looking really unlikely. I was starting to actually lose hope now. It felt as though the map was shaped intentionally to prevent this kind of backtracking. That empty feeling was coming back. That is, until I was graced by this glorious sight out of nowhere. There, after losing all progress, in the middle of absolute nowhere, was a line of soft snow with a forgiving angle. This could be what we needed to get to the next level. And sure enough, by jumping a couple times, we made it up pretty easily. And out of the blue, there it was. How strange it was to see it from this angle. It made it almost eerie in a way. Taking a look forwards and backwards, it was obvious we didn't have much room for error anymore. Determined now, I started throwing Geralt at this nearly 90-degree face of rock, the same area we had seen earlier when reloading the quest. I'll admit, we slid down a couple times. Luckily, it was never too far down though. I got really lucky, all things considered. I consider this a win. But finally, after some miraculous animations by Geralt and some randomness, we made a jump I never thought could happen. Victory was in our reach. It really was a weird feeling. Here I was back at such an iconic location, but without all the parameters and scripted events set by the quest. I took exactly the same route that you walk with Yennefer. It was so interesting to have this level of freedom. I really felt like I could slow down and take it all in, including this view, which in a way was symbolic of all the progress we made. Aboard the ship, everything was as we left it. Furniture, chests, doors, all exactly how they were. Even the bookshelf you lift off the sorcerer to find the Djinn is still standing upright. In a way, this felt right. It felt like a relic, a museum of sorts that stood as a reminder of a key choice and beating element to not just this game's story, but the entirety of Geralt and Yennefer's past throughout both books and games. All that thinking made me realize, the time of day is always locked when you do the quest. What does the ship, in view, look like at different times of day? If you were also curious, don't worry. It's even better than you imagined. Sunset brought out this pink-looking sun. It made the backdrop somehow even more unique. There is some serious screenshot/game photography potential here. For minutes, I stood just taking in this new perspective. The same was true when night came. The moon, snowflakes, and misty mountains seemed to flow together, almost as if the developers knew someone would try this and take it in all together. Safe to say, I was feeling beyond accomplished, and I really encourage you guys to follow along and visit the boat again yourselves. I'd love to see what screenshots you take and stuff you can find. For now, though, my work was done. I could sit knowing that an iconic location I had thought was inaccessible was actually waiting for someone to visit again. Even though I had successfully explored and answered my questions about the Last Wish ship before the quest, naturally, I now needed to know what happened after. So in this next exploration, I took things a step further. I wanted to know what would happen if we tried to complete the entire quest before even starting it. Doing so, once again without mods, was a bit of a challenge. But here's past me to show you what happened. Just like the last video, we have to get our bearings. And the only way to do that is by playing through the quest as normal. So, we arrive in Larvik and head to the inn to break up the argument between Yennefer and the very welcoming and sober Skelligers. We ask her about her mysterious requests and try to find out why she's interested in the Djinn in the first place. She'd better have a reward ready for doing all this. I mean, it's a lot of work.
I've no gold to offer in reward, but I shall be ever so grateful.
Yes, ma'am. Say no more. At your service. We exit the pub and follow her to Larvik Harbor, where she informs us that there's a ship waiting just for us. No thanks to this guy, though. She casts a spell to help us locate nearby wreckage and politely lets us know that she's going to be handling the sailing.
Mind if I take the helm?
I got a choice.
No.
So we hop on in. Seriously, Geralt, who are you trying to impress with that dive? After the concussion protocol, we set off on our way. Since it's 2026 now, I'm gonna assume that most of you have played the quest before, so let's abbreviate a little bit. Yennefer shows us 3 shipwrecks in total. The first is at this large rock, the second slightly further at this smaller rock, and the last and most important being in the middle of these 2 islands. The first shipwreck is located in a small cavern with a few drowners patiently waiting. Remember this red outline that you see on key items. It'll be important later. There's not a ton to see here. A few drowned crew, wreckage, obviously, and a few chests. Yennefer quickly tells us this isn't the right ship because of the incorrect figurehead. Moving on to the next ship, things become a bit more complex. This collection of ships is made up of Skellige longboats. You can actually see the point of one sticking above the water here. There are lots of items and things to interact with and examine here. The most important of the bunch being the bucklers here, which allow Geralt and Yennefer to guess the time period of when the ship would have wrecked. Once again, not our ship. The final area is actually much more than just a shipwreck, as we see this massive crater in the sea floor. Yennefer later identifies this as a result of teleportation, which seems to indicate we're on the right track. Sure enough, after diving for what feels like 20 minutes, we're able to locate half of a broken seal, which, when we bring it back to Yennefer, is found to be part of what once held the mage's Djinn. She then uses this to teleport us within reach of the other half, which of course takes us to the ship that we returned to in the last video. But let's back up. Now that we know the locations of all the wreckages, we can reload that last save and find them on our own terms without the help of everyone's favorite goth sorceress. I didn't mean that as an insult. Please don't be mad. Yennefer, they're making me do it, I swear. I'll be right back. As I was saying, like before, we make our way to the harbor, where once there, we see something a bit strange. The ship that you take with Yennefer is actually missing, which makes me wonder if it has something to do with triggering events in the quest. Side note, there are tons of crabs on the shore here that I never noticed before. They seem to be enjoying the campfire, so we'll leave them be. Lucky for us, we can just take this boat on the right. Thank you for jumping like a normal human being this time, Geralt. We can use the makeshift map we made earlier and locate the sites pretty easily. The first two wreckages are very similar. Both are in a bit of a strange state. We can swim down and see that all pieces and red outline points of interest are still intact. However, when we get the cue to examine them, nothing happens. Geralt doesn't make any movements, and it seems as though the game doesn't even register the action. Or so we think. Keep that in mind for a bit later. We can also loot all the chests and crates early, and it's honestly pretty neat to see that these shipwrecks are something you can just stumble upon at any time while exploring. The longboats have a lot more to examine, but once again, we get no indication that anything is happening. Things change when we get to the last and most important location, which for some reason is now guarded by a swarm of sirens. You guys can be the judge of whether CDPR put these here to try and deter players from exploring, or to mark that there was something of interest here. I think I lean towards the deterrence theory for reasons you'll see soon. After the sirens are taken care of, we should be able to just dive down and grab the seal, right? Not quite. As I mentioned earlier, this ship is located at the bottom of this crater, which wasn't a problem when we had Yennefer's magic to slow our heart rate. We see our problems start to arise pretty quickly as we make our way to the bottom, but with our last bit of breath, we're able to find the seal, and shockingly, we can loot it like normal. That's great and all, but we still have a long ways to go with empty lungs. If you were smart, you would have brewed killer whale potion beforehand and you can breathe easy. Get it? But of course, I haven't brewed it yet in this save. So instead, we just take some white rafford and swallow breaks underwater on our way up. No idea how that would work, but it got the job done. Once we surface and deal with our welcoming party, we check our inventory and see that the seal is sitting right where expected. It's weird to see it there as if it was a regular item. But now that we have the seal, that raises the question. How would Yennefer react if we then start her quest? So, once again, we head back to Larvik and strike up a conversation as usual.
No, it's not the mage who interests me. It's his Djinn.
Yeah, so, about that. We board the ship and set out like normal, but when arriving at the first two shipwrecks, something very strange happens to the interactable objects. Let's use the longboat for example. Remember when I talked about the red outlines? When I dive down towards the buckler, which is the item that usually progresses the quest, it automatically turns from red to yellow without me touching it. And Geralt seems to get caught in a loop of dialogue.
Got something. A Skellige's buckler. Clan Haemai symbols.
Donar's clan.
Donar was a babe in swaddling clothes when this buckler landed here. Got something. A Skellige's buckler. Clan Haemai symbols.
Donar's clan.
Donar was a babe in swaddling clothes when this buckler landed here.
It seems as though every single interactable item that we touched earlier got triggered at once, and Yennefer never actually gives us the signal to come back and move to the next ship. Only when I go back on my own and sit down does she start to sail away. Pretty weird, but not as weird as what happens when we get to the crater. When we stand up, things seem to be normal until...
No Djinn here, but there's something you ought to like.
What?
Half a seal.
That'll do. Come back up.
Yeah, you heard that right. Geralt and Yennefer just play their voice lines from when the seal is found and kinda just hand it over. Geralt's underwater voice when on dry land was hilarious the first time I heard it. But it's really interesting to see how the game handles this quest trigger being in your inventory ahead of time. Of course, after teleporting to the ship, everything will go according to plan. But what about if we make it to the ship on our own, like last time, but with the seal in our inventory and before starting the last wish? To answer that, we once again make our way to the miners' camp, not hut, not field, camp. Glad I could clear up my mistake from last time. Some of your comments had me rolling about it. We ride that same path, but this time we make a right before the stone arch and follow the base of the mountain until we reach that snowy incline area. We can start to see the ship and its approximate location. Unlike last time, I take Roach up with me, which actually speeds things up considerably. We are now just about 100 spacebar presses away from the destination. We abuse some geometry again and eventually hop aboard the ship. If we're going to return, we might as well do it with some better lighting, am I right? There, that's better. Once aboard, like the other shipwrecks, we can find all the examinable items outlined in red. But this time, Geralt does an animation to confirm they have been looked at. The outline remains, though, which will make for an interesting game state later in the video. The part we care about most, though, is the location of the other seal half, which is downstairs on the body of the mage himself. Normally, we would interact with these boots and then be able to trace the blood trail to the bookshelf, where we would then lift it off. Interestingly, the blood trail is never triggered as an interactable, which seems like it prevents us from furthering this particular area. It's not that big of a deal though, because the second seal half, unlike the first, isn't actually a lootable item. We can see the mage's foot poking out here though. So with the ship now explored and everything examined, what would happen if we brought Yennefer here? Well, lucky for you guys, I jumped my way back down off the ship and made my way back to Larvik, where I did the quest once again until I was teleported back to the ship. Immediately after the cutscene ends, we are met with the result of inspecting all those items early.
Nice shoes. What this means. Looks like the impact with the mountain seems Amos was quite the eccentric, asking the Djinn to lift half his ship to a mountaintop.
He didn't necessarily.
Geralt speedruns every dialogue at once, which probably freaked Yennefer out quite a bit, but honestly saved them both a lot of time. Once going back downstairs, we can see all the items are now yellow and the blood trail is now available to interact with, allowing the quest to progress. There was one last thing I wanted to try. Can you straight up leave the ship mid-quest? Maybe you had a change of heart and prefer Triss after all. But sadly, after jumping down our normal route to return, we are met with a kill box. So that's just about every scenario or state you can do the Last Wish quest in. At least all that I can think of. Let me know in the comments if there's a combination I missed or if there's a niche way to avoid some of these roadblocks. In all though, it's interesting to see how the game handles situations where a player is a bit exploration happy. I mean, technically all of these events are possible for a brand new player to stumble upon accidentally, though very unlikely. But imagine this. A completionist type player is scouring the Skellige waters, looting question marks, and stumbles upon the crater with the seal. Or, as some of you commented in the last video, is exploring the Skellige mountains and spots a random ship on top of a peak, and with a bit of effort, climbs up to it. Imagine just how confused they would be when they later start the Last Wish and run into these awkward character interactions. It's kind of funny to imagine it. Maybe next time I'll see if you can prematurely move all the mages out of Novigrad to impress Triss or something. Kidding, of course. Unless... I wasn't ready to leave Skellige just yet, and luckily I didn't have to. Like I'm sure many of you do, I was exploring some of my favorite areas post-game to see if there was anything interesting to find or items I had missed. This led me to Kaer Trolde, where I noticed that there were actually many rooms I didn't ever remember entering. That's what lit the match in my brain, and what I found turned out to be really interesting from a game design perspective, especially if you know this game like the back of your hand. Let's see what the boat goat has for us here. We arrive at the bridge to Kaer Trolde with bad intentions, if you're Red Engine that is. After strolling confidently through the main gate and turning left through the first door, we can take in the incredible misty mountain view that never gets old. At the end of this stone wall, we can look across to our right and see the area that I mentioned earlier. CDPR, come on now, this is laughably easy. By jumping over the railing and doing some simple parkour across these rocks, we can pull ourselves up onto the wooden platform. I always forget just how high up we are here. Behind us is the first of two windows that we can normally swing open with ease and jump inside. But we unfortunately hit our first roadblock here, as this one is locked tight. Jumping over to the second window, it's the same story. Take a look at this cool view of the lighthouse, by the way. CDPR, you've forced my hand here. Time for the first of my many tricks. By using a simple mod related to the built-in debug menu, we can force open any locked door with a simple command. The link to this mod and how to enable the debug menu will be in the description below. Once inside, we can see a staircase both ahead and to our left. We'll go left first, and immediately we run into a familiar place. If these tapestries didn't give it away, this is the same hallway where Yennefer and Geralt hide from those brilliantly intelligent guards as a warm-up to their unicorn ride a little later. Oh, not these idiots again. If you guys are ever going to argue about which region has the smartest citizens in the Witcher universe, keep this conversation in mind. Past Brock, I couldn't agree more. What a smart guy. Also, these tapestries have some really weird physics that I've never noticed before. Continuing up the stairs, we're met with another locked door. After popping it open, we can find ourselves in an area we can normally access. Just ahead is the late and great Croc on Crate's room. I miss you, Croc. This place isn't the same without you. I know you'd at least be faster than your daughter. Croc had all the Skellige living essentials, such as a giant bathtub, roaring fireplace, and mandatory bearskin rug. The door just to the right of his room, of course, leads us back into the main dining hall. This guard is probably so confused right now. But let's get back to the matter at hand. If we take the path in front of the window, we end up at this locked door where, before, a flock of ravens stood guard on these bones overhead. We pop the door open and see we are now on the other side of the first window as well, directly following in the footsteps of the original quest. Just in front of us, in this ominous yellow haze, is the room where Geralt went ballistic on all of Ermien's taxidermy, or as Djinn calls it.
Fine. We've passed the trial of taxidermy. The door stands open.
We can see the remains of that incident scattered all over the room. Ermien just never felt the need to clean it up, apparently. Speaking of Ermien, did you guys know he had a stack of human skulls? Or a throne area? What does this guy do down here exactly? Unfortunately, though Djinn was right about the door standing open, Ermien seems to have placed a frustrating magic barrier in front of the doorway. Even by switching to Ciri, it is impossible to walk through, and was likely put here so players wouldn't backtrack during the quest. Desperate times call for my favorite measure, though. Time to use some magic of my own. Okay, not quite the result I was hoping for, but maybe we can still salvage this? We use photo mode to get our bearings and can see the laboratory that we're trying to reach. I will summon 1,000 boats if I have to, but mark my words, I will get to you. We can also see the arena where Geralt and Yennefer encounter the elemental. What I didn't expect was what was just beyond these areas. In an area just above the elemental room, there appears to be a long hallway and multiple storage rooms that eventually lead into the mountain? When did we ever see this in the game? After thinking for a while, I realized this is the storeroom and cave system that you enter during King's Gambit if you choose to help Cerys instead of Hjalmar. Not only is this the perfect spot to try and clip into the laboratory, but I also wanted to see what it would be like to revisit this place as well. Before all that, I tried spawning a boat with some height off the ground in this hallway right above the laboratory. What I found was, whoa, Geralt, too close. Yeah, back up a little bit, man. Save that for Yennefer. This spot is really interesting because we have a unique cross-section type view of the map. At first, I thought I could walk across some map borders, but after a few attempts of falling back in bounds, I decided it wasn't worth my time. I was dead set on finding that storeroom and cave now. So we headed back through the Great Hall and past the blacksmith and armorer, through the descending hallways and warrior barracks, and eventually found another locked door. But it gets even better. This is actually a fake door. For whatever reason, we can't pop it open like the others. The same is said about this one just a little further up. Add another point to the boat counter. Once again, we get put in some weird space in between the map and... Hold on, who the hell is that? After jumping down, wouldn't you know it, we find ourselves in the exact storeroom we were aiming for. And I can confirm this door will not open from this side either. Strange. The area is still flooded from the events of the quest, but it doesn't seem to bother all these strangers for some reason. What we really care about is this section just ahead leading into the cavern. After walking for a while, we can see this place of power that we saw during the quest, as well as this creepy wooden pony toy. What kid would want to play in here? Continuing on, we actually get some more bad news. Another fake door that won't open even with the mod. I sense a new boat record in my near future. Okay, this is not quite what I expected. This area is extremely close to the terrain above, which adds another layer of difficulty. But hey, at least we get this beautiful view of our boat alongside the Skellige slopes. Using photo mode again, I try to make a plan. But I got sidetracked by all of our old boats under the map. Actually, there are some other interesting things to see here. There's also this random hay pile, a fancy dresser, and what looks to be a pot of some kind just hanging out down here. Just above, we can see that on the other side of this blocked door is that hallway we saw earlier that runs right above the elemental area. It was time. You see, there's a secret technique I've been keeping from you all this whole time. The most powerful one of all. Behold, the jumping boat tech. Yeah, I didn't think that was actually going to work, but I'll take the credit nonetheless. From this perfect landing spot, we can hop down onto this map border and jump back in bounds into, you guessed it, the elemental arena area. Another seemingly impossible barrier falls to the unbeaten boat method. Now we are free to explore the laboratory as we please. Everything is pretty much as we left it, and because I looted every item in this save, none of the quest items remain in their place. Also missing is the statue we used to open the secret door. It's been replaced by some candle wax? I honestly don't know what is real anymore. Walking into the arena now, we can see that unfortunately our elemental friend is missing. He must be Pebbles by now. And something I didn't think about is that this room is actually a complete dead end, as during the quest you are teleported out by Yennefer. It was interesting to look around as you're usually only able to be here for a designated amount of time. Now that we had conquered Ermien's arena, it was time to move on to the mountain race area with Ceres. By going back to that balcony with the windows from earlier, we can jump off the other side and use our usual parkour tactics to scale the mountainside. After making it to the back of the fortress, we can simply continue forward and voila, we made it. I have to say, this is one of the easiest places by far to explore and find your way back to. You can do this without any mods and on any platform. We run the track like normal, and as we reach the top and see the axe that usually triggers the player's victory, it occurred to me once again that the time of day is locked during this quest. So we climbed to the top of this mountain to get what I consider to be one of the best views in all of Skellige. And after meditating, we can see what it's like at sunset. Whew. That was a lot of boats and not a lot of time. It's nice to relax and enjoy some peace after that absolute war we went through. What a satisfying end. Remember earlier when I was talking about key areas in the game we usually forget about after completing their quest? Well, this one is a bit harder to ignore as it towers over all of Velen. I wanted to take my usual before/after the quest exploration approach and apply it to Bald Mountain, a place riddled with quest flags and boundaries that are just begging to be broken. Once again, I had no access to mods when recording this video, so some intriguing things occurred, to put it in simple terms. Also, I was pretty sick when recording the audio for this video, so apologies in advance. But maybe it'll be more soothing that way. I don't know. Here's Delirious Sick Brock to show you what I found. In a newer save, of course, there would be no reason for the player to stumble upon Bald Mountain in normal progression. So, I had to sail there. Look at it just looming in the distance. We arrive at the dock and signpost, then start our trek up the steep hillside. The daytime sunlight definitely gives a less eerie feeling. We find this lake area that, dare I say, looks a bit inviting, before hearing some unpleasant sounds from the village behind. Foglets have infested this area, which, interestingly enough, is the only sign of life of any kind anywhere. The houses are empty and disheveled. A few candles remain lit, but that's about it. We do find these slightly disturbing statues that I can only guess depict the three members of the gorgeous crones. We're approached by more foglets, which I want to add are strikingly high level considering this is Velen. We continue along the path with that terrifying tree always looking down on us. Let's make the atmosphere a bit more fitting. Yeah, that's more like it. We reach a bridge where I can already see more foglets to deal with, but before that, we take the path to our right further up the mountain. Is the moon always like that? Why does it feel Never mind. We finally come to a large and familiar door, which of course is locked. That makes sense from a story perspective, but keep this in mind for later. We head back down to the, oh my god, that sunset. When we step onto the bridge, we see this really odd and ominous hole in the ground. Of course, we can't ignore that, so we overlook the foglets again to go take a look. This hole, surprisingly, leads down into none other than the Crone's arena, and by that logic, it's the same hole that the Weavis escapes through in the fight with Ciri. I tried for quite a while to jump down without dying and concluded that there's a kill box preventing just that. Don't be discouraged, because we'll find our way there at some point. Back to the village now, we finally deal with the foglets and once again are met with a quiet and lifeless area. This place, that I only knew as a busy festival ground, now feels abandoned or forgotten. It's a weird feeling. Next, we check out the tent where Thekla, the blind elderly woman who admits people to see the crones, is found during the quest. She's nowhere to be seen now, of course, but her cauldron and other questionable tools and materials are here. Just past the tent, we see more cultish things, and finally walk out onto the platform where Geralt dives in to pass Thekla's trial. We recreate that and are met with a drowner couple who peacefully invite us into their home. We swim further and eventually make it into the cave. It's important to add that the Defier's Orin is not here at this time, so you can't grab it early. We enter into this opening with a small waterfall and more importantly an opening at the top. I tried for quite a while to parkour my way up, but there's definitely an invisible barrier here. Using photo mode we can confirm this, but we also see there's definitely something back there. Once again, keep that in mind for later. Exiting the cave now and going to shore, it's also important to mention that the fiend that attacks you in this quest is also not here. I was a bit scared it was going to jump me at any moment though. If we keep to the left, we can find another small cave system that some, unfortunate souls found as well. There's not much more to note about it though, other than some random loot. I was still so curious about the summit. What about Imlerit's throne area? With photo mode again, I try to take a closer look and see that the area is definitely there, but the throne itself is not loaded in. The floating torch lets us know that. What about the Crone's area though? I take the camera there as well and see there's actually stuff down there. The cauldron for one is sitting ready, and it's obvious that there's plenty of entrances and exits here. I do really wish I could explore these with Geralt. Hint, hint, foreshadow, foreshadow. But for now, let's see what changes when we visit after the quest. On a New Game Plus save now, if the Erendite didn't give it away, we make that same trek up the mountain. The foglets are the same, but something is different, as they kill a villager right in front of my eyes. Sorry about that, man. The fires are all lit now, and we see this blacksmith who's scared of... What are you scared of? Oh, right, one moment. We keep heading further, and it becomes obvious that the feeling of Bald Mountain is much different. There's a lot more here, including this dog who's also a bit spooked. Then we find one of the funniest things I've ever seen while exploring. There's a full festival happening with some uninvited guests right in the middle. It's not slowing anyone though. How much have they drank? The cult members just kind of dance as I take care of the foglets. Like, guys, hello, stop juggling for a second, please. Everything is lively now, almost the same as when you're here with Ciri. We can also find Thekla. She's in her normal spot, muttering something ominous as usual. Going back to the platform again, we see someone seasoning the water for us.
Where are you headed?
You're going home, man. Right before jumping, we find a copy of Ithlinne's prophecy, the one from the books detailing Ciri's fate. Fitting location, to say the least. In the cavern, unfortunately, nothing has changed. We have the coin now, and there's still no way to access the upper level. Yet. We head back across the bridge and find none other than Johnny playing by himself in some debris. It's a bit sad.
The 33 thieves thought they thrilled the throne throughout Thursday. Ha!
You tell him, kid. We climb up towards what was a locked door before, but now we see it sits open. Once inside, we find this opening where Fugus was, the Sylvan who guarded the way before Geralt handled him. There's also this guy hanging around, and tons of skulls indicating Fugus was more successful with other non-Witcher people. We do find what I believe are his remains here, which hold the key to Bald Mountain. No idea why it's still here. There's two paths we can take now, so we go left first. We walk in the dark for a while until we find a large waterfall flowing into an open hole. We trust there's something to break our fall, and we were right. We swim to the shore and walk just a bit further until we find ourselves in, you guessed it, the Crone's Pit. The lighting and sound design are both very unnerving. I kept feeling like they were going to be standing behind me when I turned around or something. Of course, their cauldron is here, ready to be used again, and scattered across the floor we can find some ingredients that they could use. There are lots of strange fungi, plant life, and huge roots, just going to show how seriously CDPR takes their environment design. If we look up, we can see that hole we were at earlier. I told you we'd make it down here. We spot this other pathway which catches my interest, so we follow it. Surprisingly, we find an old chest with a relic sword inside, and after jumping down past it, we end up in a familiar place. That cavern we were just in earlier. Once again, told you we'd connect that dot. Back to Fugus's room now, we take the right path. It's much deeper than the other, and we walk quite a long ways until we end up in this clearing area. It's oddly peaceful, and we can see some light is coming through somewhere, and that somewhere leads us above ground. Immediately, we see these distressed peasants. I don't know what their problem is, but you can see we're really close to the summit now. We keep on this path and get this really ominous view. We find a couple small offerings, and after finding some famous crone ear decorations, we rest at the place of power just ahead. I always thought that it was convenient that they put this here just before the boss fight. As we get closer to the top, we can see just how high up we are, along with some debris and random items that found their way here. When we finally emerge into the final summit area, it becomes clear that the game doesn't really know what's going on. The voice lines and dialogue of the succubi are still playing, despite them not being here at all. We take a closer look at the bonfire, and we can see it's about to cause a full-on tree fire. Then it would really be a bald mountain, right? Okay. We approach the now loaded throne area and see this chest to the right. We can finally take a look at Imlerith's homemade throne. But where is Imlerith, you might be asking? He's here. 7/8 of him, at least. It's actually really cool that he's still here to find, but also hilarious that he just lies here indefinitely after the fact. This one's for Vesemir again. There's one last important thing I wanted to see at the summit, being the spot where Ciri and Geralt sit after it's all said and done. It's found right over here, and you can even light some candles to pay tribute. I know Velen isn't quite the prettiest place on the continent, but this view is alright. With the glow of the moon, the flickering fires, and still air, this all really scratches that nostalgia itch and was exactly what I was hoping to find in returning. Please come see it for yourselves if you haven't already. After finally getting a proper setup, I embarked on my biggest video yet. One thing had been a constant in making my previous videos, and that was this message warning me that I had approached the world border and couldn't go any further. It was annoying, until I realized it could be a golden opportunity to find some things we had never seen before. So I challenged myself to explore the entire border of every single map in The Witcher 3. Looking back, yeah, that was a crazy idea. Fun fact, I thought of, recorded, edited, and finalized this video all in one day. Luckily, I've learned to pace myself a bit more nowadays. Let's jump into White Orchard to see what lies waiting for us beyond CDPR's blockade. Starting in White Orchard, our intended route is to make a clockwise circle of the border, beginning near the sawmill. As we set out towards the mysterious village in the distance, the game lets us know we've gone far enough. As I've shown in previous videos, we can get around this easily by switching the playable character to Ciri, as she does not have the barrier script attached to her character. We're now free to walk past that message and go wherever we like. I should say wherever there is solid ground. Clipping through the map is the one problem we'll encounter in some areas, so mapping a route is key. Speaking of that village from earlier, we can take the camera there using photo mode to get a closer look. It turns out to be a low poly model of a city. In a way, the layout somewhat reminds me of a much smaller Novigrad. Devs often use models like this to fool the player into thinking there's more outside of the playable area, while also saving on system resources. Behind the city, we can see a vast body of water, which you'll find is quite common in Witcher maps. Back on the ground, we turn right and start our long trek. We encountered this marsh area just west of the Nilfgaardian outpost. If I didn't know any better, I'd think this was Velen. We swim across the river and get a better look at where we are. In this west corner, there is very little solid ground to work with, so navigation gets a bit tricky. Just beyond the trees, we can see there is actually a lake area feeding into the ocean that looks surprisingly well detailed for somewhere you'd never normally see. We can also find the other side of this bridge that doesn't have any collision. It's refreshing to see some of these very familiar areas from a new perspective. We run through the dense forest for a while before finding a random path that seemingly leads nowhere. Using photo mode, we see it originates near the windmill before trailing off. Most likely, the devs did this once again to give the illusion of a larger world. We are greeted by a ghoul, which tells us we've accidentally made it back in bounds. This place of power sits extremely close to the world border, which I didn't think about until now. Once beyond the border again, we run into this collection of tents holding various army equipment and some dead livestock. There are also a few cots and an empty chest. My only guess as to what this is for is to perhaps add some detail in case the player is able to see this area from a point in bounds. It sits just behind the windmill though, so I'm not too sure it's visible at all. Let me know what you think this could be for. After finding ourselves at the gate on Kaer Bridge, I wanted to point out an area that is technically in bounds, but is one that I still feel many players miss. Here we can find a deserted battlefield, much resembling the one from the opening cutscene to the game. This is an excellent example of environmental storytelling, as just by stumbling across the area, players can learn a great deal about the history and previous events in White Orchard prior to the game. We head back out of bounds and find yet another path. Upon inspection, this one is similar to the last, but actually leads from the battlefield to this area far away from the main map. You'll notice there is still a surprising amount of terrain detail even in areas that are far out like this. Heading south past the ransacked village now, we find ourselves at this beach. We cross the river and then run into a herd of deer. Even the out-of-bounds areas feel alive. Just south of the abandoned village, we come across this bandit camp that is once again right on the edge of the playable map. After running for a little while longer and falling through the map a few more times, we eventually spot the low poly city from earlier, meaning we have successfully completed our route. It's time to move on to the much larger, later game maps with more to see. Before starting the walking simulator back up, I did briefly want to talk about Vizima. Though there is technically no map border to break past, I have always wondered what lies beyond the castle. So, using photo mode, we exit through the top of the garden to find out just that. Here, after checking out a low poly bird, we can get a cross section of the map and see just how little space it takes up. We can also see that there's actually a surprising amount of terrain in the area, including this ominous misty pit. The most interesting part, however, lies just over here where there is a raised area with a portion of the ground being bloodstained. There's also a cutout in the terrain, possibly for a structure, and various details such as trees and plants that seem unnecessary given they will never be seen. Perhaps this area was for cut content. Back to the castle now, one of my favorite details is that in this room where Ambassador Varatra is, the ceiling is actually made of one giant stretched out rug. I have no idea why, but it is hilarious. We find that a lot of the rooms look very different from this angle. Finally, looking under the map, we can see there are some things left over, such as this chest and a few ladders that clip into the ground from above. We can also finally confirm that the door at the bottom of that staircase does in fact go nowhere. There are also some various props and a basic cube hanging out down here. I was actually pleasantly surprised by how much there was to find in the game's smallest map. Maybe not quite as excited as this guy though. Okay, time for the big one. Our route through the Velen/Novigrad area takes us from the Nilfgaardian garrison in a large box-like counterclockwise loop. Taking a look at the garrison first, we of course find that the gate is closed tight. This is no problem though, as we can use these tents to hop the spiked wall. Here we're hit with the map border message, so after switching to Siri, we can explore the encampment freely. There are so many more tents than I expected, and they deload as we get close, once again due to how the game optimizes resources. Using photo mode, we can see that the tents continue all the way up this hill, ending near this watchtower at the top. The encampment is much bigger than I had ever thought, and I'm glad we could see it in its entirety. To get back out of the garrison, we can use these exposed logs to hop over the wall once more. Sitting at the very bottom right of the map now, we can start our main route by heading north. Immediately we find yet another random path that leads somewhere far off into the wilderness. By running right on the outside of the map, we can get this beautiful view of the riverside, which I never thought I'd say about Velen. To stay out of bounds, we have to swim across this large lake. After attempting to do so, we find out that walking isn't really an option at the moment. I also almost fell off the map while underwater somehow. So, I invoke my title of Boat Goat once more to summon something a bit faster to get us across. On our way though, I notice a strange formation in the cliffside just ahead. By taking a closer look, we can see that this is actually the Temple of Lilvani, also known as the place where you meet Olgierd and Gaunter to end Hearts of Stone. By looking out, we can see ourselves from this vantage point, which is pretty cool. Just a bit further, we find some actual solid land to walk on, but it is here that I notice something interesting. On the map, there's a circular lake far outside the playable area. By taking the camera over, to my surprise, it's actually here. Interesting detail considering the player would never know it exists. Continuing on, we find ourselves in this mountainous region. Similar to White Orchard, this area is tricky to navigate and has very little solid ground. Even more surprising is that this area also has enemies, as I was approached by this group of Neckers just a few steps further. We once again accidentally find ourselves back in bounds near Tayer, and after dealing with some ghouls and this Ericus I forgot existed, we find ourselves on the outside of the Dead White Woods. The lighting gets a bit more unsettling here as we progress. Just ahead, we pass by the Kilkerin ruins and are interrupted by some arachnomorphs. Just about the most unpleasant surprise possible. To make things all the more better, there are even more Neckers ahead. But after dealing with all that, we can descend this hill to find ourselves near the windmill at the top right of the map. Running through this village is a large river. And as I found in a previous video, right after this lake that feeds the river, you can find the two mansions used for the Painted World segment of Scenes from a Marriage. To see my full return and exploration of these two areas, click the button above or check the description. North of Brunwick now, we run through some more forest, past a couple of bandit camps, and get randomly dive bombed by a wyvern. I was not expecting to do this much combat during this video. We're now north of the isolated hut in this marsh-like area. After heading uphill for a while, we can see that we are steadily approaching Novigrad from the north. Sure enough, after coming down, we can see the Temple of Eternal Fire living up to its name. Once we cross the water, we can see a location that looks really familiar. It turns out to be the shipwreck that occurs during Hearts of Stone. I must have run from the mage in this playthrough. After a while, they'll eventually build an encampment, as you can see. Well, I don't feel like fighting him now either. Speaking of things I don't feel like dealing with, we also see this lighthouse that is crawling with drowned dead. We're now on this island just to the north of Novigrad. I was curious to see if the map was accurate as far as the other islands to the north of us. And after checking, the other two islands that were shown on the map turn out to be here in game as well. We have a lot of water ahead of us, so I do what I do best. Then we set out in the Novigrad Bay. We first come across this boat sailing very slowly in the opposite direction. We can see that again it is a low poly model used to sell the illusion of a busy port outside the city. There are actually quite a few of these boats periodically in the area. As per usual, I've talked a lot already, so let's take a moment to relax and take in the sunset at sea while we sail for southern Velen. About halfway to our final destination, I noticed this island that I've never seen before. When taking a closer look, it appears as though a griffin has made its nest here. I don't think I've ever done the contract associated with this area. I guess I'll have to go back and check that out sometime. There is a large cluster of islands and land at the south of the map, but sadly, upon looking closer, many of them are bare and have no collision. Just to the southwest of Bald Mountain, we finally complete our sailing and set out on foot again. We run through the dark woods and scale the side of the hill next to the destroyed bastion. The forest in this area seems to go on forever, which is due to the surprisingly dense environment and some very clever trickery by CDPR. A good example is this collection of trees, that are angled in this way to appear more layered from the player's perspective. The sun was starting to rise as we approached the last segment of our Velen route. Just like that, we ran back into the Nilfgaardian garrison area. We can even see Bald Mountain from here. Another map is complete. Up next, it's time for what was perhaps the trickiest map to explore. Our route through Skellige ideally starts at the Tower of the Falcon in the west and goes clockwise around all the isles. So, starting at the abandoned village, we make our way down to the ocean and hop in a boat to take the same route that Geralt does when starting the Isle of Mists. A quick fact on that, by the way, because the Isle of Mist is an entirely separate map from Skellige, it is not possible to return to it without modding the game. I know, I was a bit surprised too when I found out it wasn't actually a part of Skellige. The game actually lets us go a pretty good distance before a swarm of sirens and the usual message stops us from progressing. Ciri, as usual, sails past this no problem though. We first go to check out this longboat just ahead, and like the one in Novigrad, it is slowly moving to give the illusion of it actually being a manned ship. This boat, however, is not low poly, and is actually the same model as the boats that are sunk in the last Wish Quest. Skellige has tons of unique islands just sitting outside the playable area. It's one of those details that adds to the immersion so well that you never even notice it until it's pointed out. Okay, so like I said at the start of the video, yes, I really did sit and sail the perimeter of Skellige for a few hours looking for unique details. And I'm going to be the first to say, compared to the other maps, there really isn't all that much there. Skellige's main content lies on dry land, and those isles don't have world borders. So instead of just moving on, I decided to show some things that are often forgotten or missed by players. First up is this island just to the north of where you find the Djinn with Yennefer. But before you get there, you can see this tiny rock with one single drowner guarding some treasure. I totally forgot about this. At the island though, there is a ship docked nearby being swarmed by sirens. On shore, there is actually a polar bear, something you don't see that often when exploring normally, at least I don't. If we scale the cliffside to the highest point, we can get a really nice view of a rather uncommon area of Skellige. The last thing I'll mention is rather well known, but definitely worth including anyway. On an island southwest of the Tower of the Falcon, we can find yet another ship and a rather lifeless area. But after hiking to the top of the mountain, we can find this platform with a dead bear and a shrine of shields and other weapons, as if it was laid here as sacrifice. As far as I know, there is no explanation of what this is or why it is here, and in the chest beside it, there is some decent loot as well. Though this section was a bit unconventional, to say the least, I hope you still got something out of it, or at least enjoyed the Skellige music. It's now time for the map I was the most excited to explore. I'll be honest, I am still confused by the Kaer map even after exploring the whole thing. Unlike any of the other maps in the game, about 80% of Kaer out of bounds areas are blocked by invisible barriers. I'm so curious as to why. The reason I say 80 and not 100% is because you can still get out of bounds easily at the Bastion location. Not far beyond its walls, the boundary message pops up, which I will add is super quick when you think about how close you are to a signpost. Switching to Ciri, we can head north up this cliffside where we are immediately met with stretched and low poly textures. After climbing for a while, we can see the reason we are up here, as we start to take in this incredible view of the valley and the surrounding mountains. We can actually continue even further up using timed rolls and momentum to get this final result. To this day, I consider this to be one of my favorite views in the entire game. Here's where things get interesting though. As I was descending, very carefully, down the cliffside, I looked across to that gigantic mountain behind the main fortress. As I said before, there are invisible barriers literally everywhere on this map. But what if we could find a way to get to the top? As a preliminary test, I used photo mode to examine the peak, and to my surprise, the ground was solid, meaning a character can stand on it without falling into the void. This created what could be a great discovery, or the biggest waste of time in channel history. So obviously I tried it. I want to keep the full climb in here in case you guys want to see the route, so I apologize in advance for all the fast forwarding. I started at the damaged wall at the main fortress and first scaled the side of the much smaller mountain before the tallest one. Once past it, you can see just how high up we have to go. Next, we cross the valley and start the ascent up the not-so-steep portion of the mountain. It was slow, but steady. Using the portions of grass makes it much easier. We can now take a look back and see how much altitude we have already gained. There's still a lot of grass in this next section, so it's also pretty easy. Here you can see we are almost going straight upwards at a full 90 degrees. They need to start calling Siri Billy Goat instead of Swallow at this point. Once near the top, progress slowed down considerably, and I could tell carpal tunnel was in my future. The view was already incredible, but we still had a long ways to go. Things actually began to ease up towards the top, and it didn't feel like there was much of a fall risk. When I finally made it, the view was even better than I thought. It's so weird to look almost straight down at the main fortress. I spent quite a while taking screenshots and then swapped back to Geralt to meditate and see it at night as well. Being up this high made me wonder though, what is beyond all the mountains in this map? Well, by using photo mode, the answer appears to be more mountains. Seriously, CDPR did not cut any corners here. And every single inch of this place is fully rendered, sculpted mountain terrain. No skybox or funny tricks, just great map design. This experience moved Kaer up my favorites list for sure. At last, we're moving on to the final map in the game. The one that many have said could have been a whole game all on its own. The route around Tucson is an interesting one to say the least, beginning at the Artak Palace ruins and then heading counterclockwise across many types of terrain. So doing just that, we sprinted to the western border, where we were met with the world boundary message just before this river. As you can probably guess, Ciri swims across no problem. Immediately we see something strange, as there is a broken wagon with fallen soldiers surrounding it as if it was attacked. Even further east of this though is something even stranger. On the same path as the cart, tucked out of bounds, is this fully modeled vineyard. Similar to some other decorated buildings in the game, it has no interiors and is only fully viewable from certain angles. I cannot recall ever going here during any of the quests, but if you know more about this place, please leave a comment. Heading beyond the vineyard, we end up in this wide field of flowers with a great view of the mountains and Tucson skyline. Northeast of Fox Hollow, we can find this small waterfall, which just reminds me that water in Tucson just looks so much better than everywhere else in the game. Beyond that, we find the first of many random paths in Tucson, this one being in the far west. It leads far off the map towards the mountain range. And speaking of mountain ranges, I know I just climbed one, but I can't help but be curious if this peak overlooking the entire region is also possible to go up. Sure enough, the camera found that it too has solid ground at the top. So, if you want to see me climb it next, let me know and I'll add it to my ever-growing list of random things to do in the game. After frolicking in some more flowers, we find this pleasant stream to follow for a while. Tucson's out of bounds area literally feels like you're still in the main map. Everything is decorated so nicely and feels so alive. Also, unlike the other maps, you would have to try really hard to clip through the world in Tucson. In the southern region of the map now, I was progressing like normal until I saw a house in the distance completely pop out of existence. Using photo mode, I was able to find it once again and confirm I'm not crazy. This low poly house is used as a background detail and once again is one of those things that adds to the immersion very subtly until you notice it. There's also a path that strangely leads right by the house and into the main playable map. which makes me wonder if this area was meant to have more to it at one point. At the southeastern corner now, we cross the river and begin our return north as we see the map struggle to handle this new approach. We also see this interesting rock formation, which, once climbing up, gives us this pretty nice overlook of eastern Beauclair. Once climbing down carefully as always, we arrive at this spot near the river bend where we find yet another path that this time has NPCs walking along it. I took a closer look and found, surprise surprise, that they are walking to nowhere. When they reach a certain point, they simply just turn around and stroll back into the city. I never even thought about where NPCs go until now, but this seems like a tough life. Just over the hill, we are once again attacked by a random Draconid. How did that happen twice in one video? We eventually find ourselves back at the northern part of the map and looking ahead at the Danamebi temple ruins. The ruins across the river are usually inaccessible, so let's take a look and see what they're like. We swim across and run through these really creepy woods and find ourselves under the ruins? Turns out these ruins are not a location at all. They're simply a model with no collision tucked into the woods as a world building detail. The trees are even clipping through the middle. As you may know from one of my previous videos, to the north of this location is another path, and by following it and then heading over the nearby hill, you will actually end up back at the Land of 1,000 Fables from the Beyond Hill and Dale quest. Check out my full video exploring the location before and after the quest above or in the description. Though we may have completed our loop now, it would be stupid not to mention perhaps the most famous out-of-bounds secret. Past the mountains in the far southwest is a photo of the CDPR dev team that worked on The Witcher 3. By opening the map, you can see it doesn't even register because of how far out it is. What? Oh, this monstrosity? Yeah, apparently if you switch characters too many times, you can get Geary or Seralt or whatever you want to name this abomination. On that strange note, that was our last map to explore. Now I'm the one who needs to get some steps in. When thinking about one-off locations that many players look back fondly on and wish they could explore longer, it's safe to say that the Land of 1,000 Fables from Blood and Wine takes the cake as the most obvious and beloved example. I remember reading a Reddit post from way back around the DLC's initial launch from a player that had somehow managed to clip outside the area and find its roundabout position relative to other locations in Toussaint. This gave me the idea to once again try and get there and check it out before and after the quest where you're normally teleported there. If I'm being honest, this is one of my favorite videos I've ever made, so I hope you enjoy it just as much. Starting at the top rightmost corner of the normally accessible region of Toussaint, also known as the ruins you can find the mutagen transmutation recipes in, we can use photo mode to confirm what we already expected. Just off the beaten path, tucked away behind Hill and Dale, get it? We can find the Land of 1,000 Fables just eerily sitting here clipping into a mountainside. We walk just past the ruins into this river, which is where we meet our first obstacle. After trying to swim across, we're caught by the Fun Police, also known as the message telling us we're at the world's boundary. This would be a problem if we didn't find out the easy fix to it last video. By typing Siri into the debug menu, we can switch to her as the playable character, and then swim across no problem. The reason this works is because she was never intended to be capable of roaming the open world, so her model doesn't have the boundary trigger tied to it. Like last time, I'll leave the information on how to enable the console in the description below. After crossing the river, we can just run straight through the woods for quite a while. Eventually, we reach this strange, bare strip carved out in the grass. I honestly have no idea what this was put here for, but my best guess is it was some kind of guide or marking for the developers during environment building. If we follow it, we can see that unlike the out-of-bounds area in Velen, Toussaint is actually very fleshed out and immersive. We even see this lake area that looks pretty natural. The world does bug out a bit when chunks begin to load, but this is probably due to the unnatural player location that was never intended and thus never optimized. Eventually we do reach the end of this road, but luckily the rest of the way is pretty simple. We head over the crest of this hill where here we can see some stretched out textures telling us we're really out there. After a while, the game filter changes drastically to one that should look pretty familiar. And that tower in the distance should also be familiar. What is not expected though is this shimmering magic wall that acts as a boundary for the entire area. I do want to add that this wall is not present in any of the videos that return here after the quest. Just to the left of all this, there are some straggling mushrooms just sitting here, which I can only guess are used for decoration when looking at the area from a tall height, such as the tower. Back to the problem at hand, though. There was only one solution that made sense. You know what's coming. Okay, well, I'm out of ideas. To the far right, we can climb up this plateau and find the first section of the land where you follow the yellow brick road. After trying for a while to jump over the barrier and even use mushrooms to parkour my way inside, all I managed to do was get myself stuck in between geometry and softlock myself. And no, the boat didn't work here either. I'm ashamed to admit how many times I tried the boat method here. This is going to take some thought. The next thing I tried was climbing the mountain range to the left of the area. This actually managed to get us some pretty good height, but unfortunately every attempt to jump the barrier ended in us dying to fall damage or a kill barrier. Next, I tried to slide all the way down into this forest of purple trees, but that just resulted in about 20 minutes of confused running through brush with no way of knowing which way was up. Back to the drawing board. I decided to take the tactical approach and scout the area out with photo mode, where I found that this back mountain is actually not solid, and beyond it there are some even higher peaks that sit right over the main pathway. With that in mind, I went back to climbing, eventually reaching the highest point. It was the moment of truth, and I disabled fall damage in the console just to be safe. After jumping through the canopy of this tree, I eventually fell down and emerged into the main area of the Land of 1,000 Fables. I honestly couldn't believe the barrier was beaten that easily and without the use of boats, but hey, I'm not complaining. Now that I had made it inside, it was time to explore starting from the beginning. First and foremost, we can see the sign that Geralt reads right after being teleported. Naturally, we now follow the yellow brick road, eventually finding the homes of the dwarves who are all mysteriously named Grig. Sadly, it doesn't look like their home. So we head further down the path. Phasing straight through this hill, we can find the bridge and a body of a less fortunate dwarf. Just beyond that, we can find our first major area, the house home to the Wicked Witch, and more importantly, where we first find Sienna. Luckily, her deadly broom isn't here this time. And it appears that all of the doors are closed, unlike after the fight. We can also take a closer look on what she's preparing to dump on us later when we actually do the quest. How diligent of her. It's really weird to see just how quiet this area is. It definitely gives Crookback Bog vibes. We move on through some more geometry and to the end of the yellow brick road where we first get a glimpse of that iconic first reveal of the tower. Similar to the Last Wish ship, the time of day is no longer locked, so we can finally enjoy the sunset lighting in this area. Just a bit further, we notice that Joss, thank God, is missing. Hopefully he was finally right about those wolves. Hidden just behind this hill on the right, we can find the field where we normally plant the beans to grow the beanstalk and progress the quest. More on that a bit later. For now, we step into the village and we can find that the notice board actually has stuff on it. The Golden Goose quest is notably missing though. Also missing is the Fistek girl. It's a shame because I was really curious what would happen if you got Sienna's sash early. Next we can find that Thumbelina and her tiny village are both already here. Sadly though, you can't step on her. Wait, hang on, that sounded terrible. For the sake of exploration, I tried stepping on her and turns out you cannot. Okay, moving on. We find what's left of the first two little pigs' houses, and that's when I realized, because this is technically an area Geralt is allowed in, we should be able to switch to him. This turns out to be true, and immediately we blow the last house down, and wait, is that the bean? Okay, now this is interesting. Now I have to find the rest of them. We head up the trails a ways until we reach Grandma's house. The Wicked Witch is, fortunately or unfortunately, still stuck under the house, and we can actually inspect her like normal. Noticeably missing, though, is the big bad wolf, which may be a problem for finding all the beans. Inside the house, everything remains the same in terms of lootable items, so instead we just jump down into the well. Just like normal, we can find Little Red Riding Hood at the bottom, but the lootable items are missing. The chest just outside the cave entrance is here, however, and I forgot all about this journal inside of it. Sadly, one of my favorite parts of the whole area is not in its usual spot. The beloved stack of animals from... What fairy tale is that from? The Town Musicians of Bremen. I would have never guessed that. Next, we can see that the body of the dragon is also here, and like the Wicked Witch, we can inspect it like normal. In the lake right next to it, where I believe a unique set of armor is found, we can see that there is a chest on the shipwreck below, but it's not lootable for some reason. We head just up the hill now and take a look at the area where the golden goose is usually being held hostage. Looks like she must have handled it on her own this time, but just in case, I open the door for her. Down in the bear cave, Goldilocks is the only one home. We can also see that all the food is just sitting, getting cold, which is not how I remember the tale going. It is nice to take a look around without 600 kilograms of angry fur trying to bash our head in, though. The next discovery is a strange one. This appears to be one of the wisps that leads you into a trap of enemies when you follow it, except now it just kind of sits here and makes Geralt wish he had those glasses from Hearts of Stone already. Time for the part myself and all of you have been waiting for, Longlocks Tower. On the stairs, we can of course find the unfortunate knight who accidentally hit spacebar instead of Alt. Been there, man. We climb up like normal and take in a couple nice views along the way. Once in the main room, we can see that Longlocks' body is still hanging around, but luckily she doesn't jump out at us this time. Once again though, the bean is just sitting here for us to take. That makes 2 out of 3. Before all else though, we take in the mandatory view from the window. Here, let's make it even better. After a gorgeous dive, I was curious to see what would happen if we brought all the beans to the field to try and plant them. To get the last bean, I added it to my inventory using the console, and now you can see they're all sitting in my inventory waiting to be used. After arriving at the field, surprisingly the spot where you plant them is highlighted red. But after trying everything to interact with it, I couldn't get the prompt to start the cutscene. But where is the cloud area, you might ask? Well, I actually have a pretty good guess. Just above and to the left of the land, there are a bunch of random ladders and very evenly placed patches of grass hovering in midair. My guess is that like many of the areas in The Witcher 3, this area sits just out of render distance until the player is close enough, and then everything pops in when it is needed. Which theoretically means that with teleportation, we could potentially get there early as well. If you want to see me attempt that, let me know in the comments. So that covers just about everything we can find prematurely in the Fairy Tale Land. But naturally, I wanted to know what changes if you come back after the quest. So that's exactly what I did. I repeated the run back, and this time, a rainbow was waiting for us, which made finding it a lot easier. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, for some reason, the barrier stopping us from entering is no longer here, so we can just stroll right on in. What was waiting for us, however, was an entire swarm of pixies. Yippee. Just beyond them, though, was Syanna's pink unicorn. It was nice to see a familiar face, snout. Oh, by the way, did I mention the pixies? God, these things are annoying. Making our way back to the village, we can see that the Fistek girl is actually here this time. Sadly, even as Geralt, we can't interact with her. Too bad, because I wanted to beat her at Gwent again. We can find the field again, but no beanstalk. We'll experiment with that later. Unfortunately, just past that, Joss is here this time. But he is missing his signature stump, so he's just kind of levitating. Oh look, Joss! Wolves! I lied, it was just more damn pixies. Making our way back to the witch's cottage, we can see the only real change is that the doors are in fact open now. I'm relieved that broom is still missing. I have nightmares about it from time to time. We once again recreate that iconic shot of the tower, with the rainbow adding the final touch this time. I'll let you take it all in. In the bear den now, Goldilocks, the bears, and all the food is missing this time. But at Grandma's house, our friend the big bad wolf is still lying here trying to shake off that beating we gave him about 5 hours ago. Stay down, or I'll give you the Morkvarg treatment next time. I'm also sad to report that the animals are still missing after the quest. Such a shame. In Longlocks Tower, we can also see that she is missing as well. It's so weird to see what is here and what isn't in both cases. We of course step back out on the balcony to take in the view plus the rainbow this time. After jumping down, I figured there was one last thing to check. So I went back to the field to try to... These things come in like heat-seeking missiles. Where did you come from? After my blood pressure returned to normal, I used the console to give myself all 3 beans, but for some reason, the area to plant them didn't highlight itself at all. I needed to take out my frustration somehow, but it appears that Dumbelina's village has witnessed a tornado or something. I guess she's safe from the boot for now. With that, I believe every notable change has been explored in both game states. and I was feeling pretty satisfied with what I was able to discover using just a few debug commands. Now, it's time for what might be the most important exploration I've ever completed. I'm of course talking about that time I tried to explore the Painted World from Hearts of Stone once again before and after the quest. Though the area sits on the same map as the normal Velen overworld, getting there is extremely difficult without heavy modding or manipulation. That is, if you don't know about the secret third option. If you don't already know what I mean, well, I'll just let you figure it out in due time. To start, we're going to head to the top rightmost corner of Velen to the upper mill signpost. Once there, we're immediately going to head left and onto this forest path. We keep heading this way until we reach the small pond with a stream leading north. We follow that stream as far as we can until we reach the inevitable message saying we've met the world's end. This is where our first bit of game manipulation comes into play. The easiest way around this is actually by using the game's built-in debug menu, where by simply typing Siri we can switch to her as the main playable character. Links on how to use the menu will be down in the description. But why does this work exactly? Well, since CDPR never intended for Siri to roam the open world, they didn't add the world barrier parameter to her model. So you're free to explore as far as you can. Which brings us to the next bit of trickery and something that took me over an hour to figure out. What we're actually going to do is switch back to Geralt once past the barrier, right around this area north of the stream. Buckle up because it's trial and error time. I'll admit I don't actually know what to aim for here. I got a bit lucky on my end when researching. But what I do know is that right before the ground drops out from beneath the character, you want to jump into this diving animation. If you hit it in just the right spot, you end up like this. Why are we treading water in the abyss? That's a great question. And it actually comes down to common map design in open world games. Most games of this nature actually have a water layer running underneath most of their map, sitting just beneath the terrain. When developers want to add a lake or river, they simply push the terrain down beneath this layer to expose it. So that's where we are now. I'm going to do some more testing afterwards to try and get a more consistent method for this. For now, we swim forwards for a little ways to around this area just off the map. We can start to see some familiar looking buildings and terrain. 2 sets of them actually. It's here where we can see that there are actually 2 mansions used for the Painted World section. Don't worry, because we'll see both soon enough. To get out of this liminal space under the map, we swim towards these first set of buildings and to these floating items. After a while, a giant blank box appears, and after swimming inside, we actually find ourselves in the arena where Geralt fights Iris's greatest nightmare. The camera also becomes warped just like it was during that scene. Get used to it because it doesn't go away very easily. While it's cool and all to see it from this angle, how are we going to get above ground again to explore the rest of the area? I could barely say this with a straight face, but after a lot of testing, the most consistent method is this. I kid you not, spawning a boat is the only thing that works somehow. We can now take a closer look at this area without having to dodge a million Olgierd ghosts. I don't know about you all, but this part always freaked me out a bit. I really like this area that seems to trail off into nothingness. There is one problem though. This room is isolated from every other part of the area. Want to take a guess on how we get further up?
Land ho!
I love and hate that this is what I did for 4 hours. Though it's not foolproof by any means, we are able to get inside the first mansion. Up the stairs, we see the main living area complete with that terrifying bear statue. The fireplace is still roaring, and everything is pretty much as I left it in the DLC. Through a couple open doors, we can find the library. Even with the camera being a bit messed up, the lighting is still so atmospheric. Unfortunately, here is where we meet our next problem. You see, aside from these 2 rooms and the staircase area, the rest of the house and outside area is all locked behind doors. I tried for way too long to do this without an outside mod. Oh, you don't believe me? Well, to name a few, I tried summoning boats against every wall in the mansion, which actually led to this really weird glitch with Geralt running sideways. That didn't work, so I tried again in the basement. Also not looking so good. So to complete this challenge, I bit the bullet and used the door unlocker mod. I mean, just look at how easy that was. We're now free to explore the entire mansion, starting with this cool balcony area with a view we couldn't normally see during the quest. What I found really interesting was just how many rooms we can see with this method that CDPR fully modeled, but we ultimately never saw on the quest. One we are familiar with is this attic hallway and the room sitting at the end of it, where we can find the master bed and all the belongings and furniture thrown about. We can also step out onto this balcony to see why some of these areas are behind closed doors. Taking a look at the cellar now, we see that Olgierd had no plans to spend the rest of his eternal life sober. After unlocking the cellar door, we can step out into the front lawn area. To me, this empty version of the mansion was so eerie. The fact that it just sits here out of bounds, abandoned, just adds to that feeling. After exploring for a bit, it seems as though we've come across just about all there is to see at this first mansion. But if you can believe it, getting out of the mansion walls actually proved to be the most difficult and frustrating challenge yet. Here are some of my favorite methods I tried. First, the tried and true, calling Roach to the gate to see if she will step through and open it for us. Of course, she lets us down. I also tried jumping on the statue to try and get over the barrier, and when that didn't work, I summoned a boat on top of it. That didn't work either, so I tried summoning a boat on the corner of this wall. When that didn't work, I tried to use Roach to jump over the wall. Then I made Roach do a handstand to push us through and summoned a boat on top of her. Then I tried jumping onto the balcony, no can do. Boat in the basement, nope. Jumping against Roach while standing on hind legs? Nuh-uh. So back to the old reliable boat method again. This time switching to Geralt halfway through, but that just caused this terrifying glitch again. Even Scoliosis Geralt couldn't hop the wall. I was running out of options. The last-ditch effort was to use Ciri to jump up onto this broken structure, narrowly walk across the beams, and then do a leap of faith across the wall. We're finally free. And after walking away, the skybox switches abruptly to this darker night scene. That makes the abandoned mansion seem even eerier in the distance. Surprisingly, these outside gates are unlocked. And up these stairs, we can run straight into... oh. It's interesting to see what the developers left beyond the explorable zones. Okay, time to find the second mansion. By exploring with photo mode, we can see that the only thing separating the two is this very convenient hill. It feels like we're looking backstage on a movie or something. So we start running across the field until we see the gate and our camera effect changes yet again. To absolutely no one's surprise, the gate is locked and the walls have a barrier, but this time I have a plan. If we jump off this cliff, we can get just high enough to get over. Oh no, Ciri! Oh, never mind, she's good. Switching back to Geralt, it's time to look around. The first thing I notice, other than the bees still being here, is that almost all of the effects are active. Things like the dark mists, soundtrack, lighting effects, and more are all still showing up. But to my surprise, we are even attacked by some specters. It caught me really off guard. Before going inside, we take a look at the first of many paintings found here under the gazebo. Even Iris's paint and tools are still here. Once inside, we step into a familiar but much darker kitchen. After popping open this door on the right, we step back into the main living room, where this time we can take a look at the painting of Olgierd and others having a feast. The table is still set and the lighting is noticeably different as the fireplace is cold. Up on the balcony above, there are now tables and chairs and overall much more furniture than before. Out the front door, we can take a peek at the front lawn area that is almost identical to the one at the previous mansion. In the main entryway, we go right and find this completely empty but large room. I have no idea what this was for other than just holding space to maintain the house layout. If you know more, please let me know in the comments. To the left of the kitchen, we can find a smaller one just like it. And heading down towards the basement, there is now just empty space. I guess I never realized that you never go down there during this point of the quest. Back through the living room and up the main stairs, the back hallway area is actually open. As we walk through, luckily no ghosts come out of the paintings this time. Eventually we end up back in the master bedroom, though it is much more orderly and livable this time. The balcony is the same as well, minus the falling off part this time. In this side room, we can see the area where Iris worked on the portrait of her husband. We can see she was pretty busy with other artwork as well, like this portrait of literally every merchant in the game. Back at the top of the stairs, we spy this portrait of the couple together, which really makes me sad when I think about it. To the left now, we step into a very important room to the quest. Immediately, we see the painting which usually lets you escape the fire and takes you, ironically, to the mansion we previously explored. In the middle of the room, we see the summoning circle which Olgierd, of course, used to attempt to end his pact with Gaunter Dim. How weird is it to see all the candles lit just sitting here? As for the painting, we can examine it, but sadly nothing further happens. Out on the balcony and through this door, we find another bedroom which for the life of me I cannot remember from the quest. Did we enter it normally? This door leading to a stone wall seems to point to no, but it is weird that it's fully furnished. With that, we can head outside and take one last good look at the mansion. It was quite the journey to revisit a place that was so emotional and meaningful to so many players. Despite all the difficulty and roadblocks along the way, I feel very satisfied with what we were able to find and explore. Next, I had to put aside my hatred for NL's finest scammer in an attempt to fully explore the entirety of the worlds Geralt encounters during the Through Time and Space quest. These are some sites and locations that we spend a relatively little amount of time in during a normal playthrough, so getting any kind of new perspective or ability to look deeper was enough to motivate me by itself. This once again took some perseverance and unique strategy, so let's take a look at how it happened. Before we get started though, there is one major hurdle in doing this because of the way the quest is designed. To show you what I mean, let's first look at how we start the quest normally. After talking with Avallach at the Rosemary and Thyme and learning about how Eredin poisoned their former king to rise to power, Avallach shows us his maps of Novigrad's underground and points out a location where a portal will appear, allowing us to traverse worlds. This, of course, leads us to the middle of Novigrad to the quote-unquote haunted house from the Novigrad Dreaming Quest, where Corrine, Tilly, and Sarah are usually found. We ignore the upstairs for now and head into the basement where, sure enough, there is a portal waiting for us. I'm sure Geralt is thrilled. Pay close attention as we go through this portal though, as once we do, we get a full loading screen. Not just the kind where the screen goes black for a moment. This is important because it means the game is loading in a new map, which if you remember from my last few videos means we cannot reach these areas by exploring out of bounds or manipulating any of the main maps such as Velen or Skellige. All hope is not lost though, so we load an early game save, as you can see this one is level 8 and hasn't even seen the Baron yet, and make our way to Novigrad using traditional means. Once arriving, we once again head to the haunted house, and with the help of the door unlocker mod, we pop the main door wide open. The basement hatch also opens right up, but before checking down there, I was curious if Corrine and Sarah were already inside even before the quest had started. After heading upstairs though, there is no trace of either of them anywhere. Too bad. Once in the basement, we blast open this weak wall and then immediately see, as expected, there is no portal. As I said earlier though, there is another less traditional way to get there. Using the Forgotten Worlds mod, we can input a command into the debug menu to force the game to load in the separate map. Links to all the tools I use will be down in the description. After loading for a bit, sure enough, we find ourselves in the Diddiwed Desert? I have no idea how to pronounce that. You can immediately notice that the desert looks different here, and that is because the game is no longer locking the time of day, and time is passing normally. Nighttime actually makes it look even more unique in my opinion. It was really easy for me to get absorbed in the atmosphere and just wander around the area now that there was no rush from a certain elf who walks at 2 miles per hour. I also find it interesting just how useless the map is in this area. I never noticed this before. Was it like this during the regular quest as well? But as we explore, we can see that the actual playable area of this map is rather small. Near the end of the path where the sand crabs and portal usually spawn, this time there is nothing to be found. Using NVIDIA Ancel, we can get a much wider and more holistic view of the desert. Immediately, we can see how CDPR has designed the area in such a way to make it feel much larger and expansive when looking into the distance. Many rock formations, terrain elements, and forced perspective techniques are used to strategically give the illusion that beyond our small walkable path, there is a whole planet of desert just out of reach. Things get interesting as we head to the west, however, as the desert texture suddenly turned to snow out of nowhere. And even further, we stumble upon a very familiar city which happens to be none other than the NL homeworld of Tir na Lia, the area where we later encounter Gels. By backtracking a little, we can also find the Ice Plains area just over the mountain. CDPR has used one map for the whole Through Time and Space quest. with each area being strategically separated and hidden so that there is no overlap or evidence of the other's existence. This is not only genius, but extremely surprising to me, as it feels strange to know that just by walking a little ways you can end up in an entirely different world. I was starting to get some ideas for later, but for now we can use the mod to once again place us in the next world, being the Poison Valley. Once arriving, we can see that the valley is, well, poisonous. Imagine that. So we enable God mode so that we can explore at a more leisurely and oxygen-filled pace. Immediately we see something interesting. At the end of the area, we can see what looks to be the portal sitting in its usual spot. I was eager to check it out, but first we needed to look around the other areas as well. We meditate to give us a bit more visibility, but not much thanks to the mist everywhere. Later, we can find the remnants of what looked to be huge animals that inhabited this area previously, as well as some ruins of what I can assume was some sort of elven architecture given the fact that it shares textures with some other buildings we can see in the game. We can also find the place of power in its usual spot, and can use it normally. A bit of an abstract way to get an extra skill point, but who am I to judge? We finally make our way to the area with the portal, but before interacting with it, let's take a look around using Ansel once again. Similar to the desert, we can find a ton of map development and terrain far beyond the playable area. Everything is so fleshed out that it honestly makes me wonder if there was more intended for these areas than what made it in the final game. Just over the mountain, the environment switches to snow again and we can once again find the Snow Plains map. Everything is much closer than you would think. Back to the portal now. After jumping into it, surprisingly nothing happens. It appears that this is just a particle effect and the actual trigger has not been loaded in yet. I guess you got lucky this time, Geralt. No worries though, as we can once again load ourselves into the next area, being the underwater world. Once again, we can see that the portal is already loaded in, and thanks to God mode, we don't have to worry about drowning, so we're free to explore as we like. To the left, there are some elven ruins, complete with statues and some valuable ores in these two pots. I had never realized until now that this area was probably above water at one point, and had later become flooded. I'm curious if there's any further lore about this location or how it became submerged. Because you usually have to worry about drowning and hurrying to the portal in normal gameplay, this area is much smaller and a bit claustrophobic. Using Ansel, we can see just how cramped it is in here. I did have an idea as to how we could see what was on the outside of this cave. I'm sure you guys have no idea where this is going. As I've said before, it is truly astonishing how effective the boat method is in this game. We are now sitting underneath the normal map and just on top of the water layer. CDPR appears to have just created a little pocket of terrain underneath the map to give the illusion of this isolated area. We can confirm this using Ansel, and likewise by looking out through the terrain we can see that we are once again able to see the Snow Plains area. Everything leads back to the Snow Plains for some reason. Speaking of that area, we use the mod once again to load ourselves in, and now we're in one of my favorite parts of the entire game. I can never get enough of that satisfying feeling of breaking open the ice. Since God mode is still on, we don't have to worry about freezing to death, so we can explore freely. Taking the normal path at first, we can see that all of the loot is here waiting for us. And after sliding down to the first house, even the various travelers' notes are here to read early. I actually had a lot of fun running around and taking a closer look at this place without Geralt complaining of, dying of frostbite. So I highly recommend you guys try this out for yourselves as well. I had never noticed before just how many buildings there are in this area. So many of them are already almost completely submerged by frost, and CDPR once again placed an extra amount outside of the normal path to show how big this village or city used to be before the White Frost took over. Somehow there is one singular tree that has survived this whole thing. Maybe Aroden should have spent less time looking for Ciri and more time trying to grow more of these. In the main village area now, we can enter many of the houses and buildings, once again making me wonder what the design process was for this area. Did CDPR build out the village and then imagine it frosted over? I'm curious what earlier versions may have looked like. We eventually find our way to the lighthouse, and by climbing to the top, we can actually light the fire as usual. We get our money's worth out of God mode and head down underneath the lighthouse where the portal would usually spawn. Since the quest trigger is not present, it is of course not here. But as usual, we can use the mod to move us just over the mountainside to the next map. Tir na Lia is one of those areas in the game that made me fall in love with The Witcher 3's map design. We spend maybe a total of 5 minutes in this area in an actual playthrough, but regardless, CDPR spent so much time fleshing out the details and making it feel alive. The atmosphere, including the fountains, statues, gentle candlelight, and intricate stone architecture, is so unique and really sells the feel of an ancient civilization preserved carefully for centuries. Something interesting to point out is that many of these iron gates can be opened using the Door Unlocker mod, and surprisingly there is actually quite a bit of detail beyond them. Back to the main area now, we can see the area where Gels would normally be, painting the elven woman and demonetizing my live streams. Just take a look at this overlook. That city and castle area looks so real and detailed, and I love how the snow is starting to become visible as the white frost slowly starts to take over their world. We can once again meditate to get a quick sunset view as well. What a treat. The painting is of course still here. YouTube, be kind, this is art. And just behind it and past this statue area, we can open another iron gate. From here, we can see some of the modeling and design of the main area, and by climbing up a ways, we can find this area of thick vines and stone pillars that seem to be just extra detail. Okay, I'm too curious, so I jumped off the balcony down to the lower level to see how much I can explore. There are actually 2 large houses on this level, which I had no idea existed. Similar to some of the buildings in Novigrad, the exterior is high detail and gives the illusion of something being inside, but once walking through, we can see there is actually nothing there. Using Encel, it's time to take a closer look at the castle across the water. There is actually a bridge connecting the 2 areas, but it appears to have no collision, so walking across it would be impossible. Not surprisingly, the city and surrounding area appears to be low res and low poly textures to save system memory, but you really can't tell at all when looking from the playable area. There are a couple of bridges that lead to nothing, which was pretty amusing, and this large castle area is actually a lot wider than I thought by just looking at it from afar. There's actually a large body of water behind it, and even further there is actually another castle or city clipping into the terrain. This would be barely visible by the player from a normal perspective, but it is just a testament to CDPR's attention to detail to put this here to make sure there is no hole in immersion. Though we can't walk across the bridge, with a far enough jump we can get past the invisible barrier and make it into the large body of water at the bottom of the cliff. Here we can summon our boat and get a unique perspective of Tir na Lia and a closer view of the massive waterfalls. So that's just about all we can see by going to the Forgotten Worlds before the quest. But one question still remained. What happens if we try to go out of bounds during the quest and make it to Tir na Lia without Avallach? After loading back into our save that we made, we ditch the elf immediately and head to the right over this canyon area that I found previously that seemed very jumpable. After trying not to slide into the pit and making a few precise jumps, we can make it to the other side. Using Encel, we can see that just over this cliff we should be free to explore the outer terrain, so we start climbing. About halfway through I switched to series so that I would slide less, and that helped a lot, as we eventually made it to the top with no problems. Here we can get a great overlook of the further desert areas, and we can actually see where the different maps intersect, as we can see desert, grass, and snow textures all in one place. Sadly, we do hit a roadblock here after many attempts, even with God mode enabled. It seems as though we cannot make it off this plateau without hitting a death trigger. CDPR must have thought ahead. I do have a backup plan though. Back at the main area, we head left this time and walk along the edge until we find a section without an invisible barrier. This took quite a few attempts, as you can see. But if we scale the side of this cliff and jump outwards just enough to avoid the kill barrier, we can end up at the base of this canyon where we can eventually begin to climb our way up. It appears that we're home free, but after sliding down we fall through the map. I was afraid this would happen, but it appears that CDPR has disabled collision in areas that are far away from the playable area. We can confirm this using Encel, as by using the camera we can clip through the ground in every connecting piece of terrain between areas. So we use our backup plan once again, and use the Forgotten Worlds mod to place us in Tir Nalia manually. Once arriving, sadly, not much has changed, but we can see that the time of day is locked once again to the time that it would be during the actual quest, which leads me to believe that the trigger to enable Gels in the cutscenes is actually the portal from the Snowy Plains area. I guess we need to make our own entertainment then. So let's give everyone the battle the fan base deserves. To finish things off, let's take another look at the video I had been hoping to make really since I started this channel in the first place. Because of the time crunch in the final quest of Hearts of Stone, our time in Gaunter O'Dim's pocket dimension is quite short-lived. Not only was I curious where it might be situated as I struggled to locate it in Velen, but also what details we might uncover by taking our time, following our hearts, and leaving no stone unturned. Apologies. Shall we? In the southeast corner of Velen, beyond the Nilfgaardian camp we also explored in that video, just past the tree line and across the river, we see the start of a pretty familiar area. Before we jump right into exploring though, this location is significant for another reason. Remember, this starting area is supposed to be the ruined version of the Temple of Ilvani. Normally, Geralt gets teleported here after challenging O'Dim. Using free cam, we can fly just across the river to see that we are actually pretty close to the real temple. Now that we know the location, I feel like we could possibly see it from here if it weren't for the fog. Okay, enough context. Let's take a closer look at the area, starting first with an aerial view. I want to quickly point out that this save I'm using has never entered this area. I used it for another challenge, and let's just say, Olgierd's in a better place now. During the daytime, we can clearly see the red point lights that are used to create that ominous red fog. Not quite as intimidating now. Speaking of which, it's really weird to see this area so well lit. Everything feels stagnant, and honestly, it's still pretty eerie. When playing the quest like normal, these pits look so deep and treacherous. But now we can see that if you weren't a witcher with glass ankles, you'd probably survive that fall. Because this quest is normally timed, I feel like I barely remembered any of these landmarks. The details, at least. And it's really impressive how well the map holds up even with this increased visibility. Taking a closer look at the house, we can see that the back end actually clips completely through the map, which makes sense when you think about what happens there in the quest. More on all of that a bit later. Zooming out, we can see that once again this area is not as isolated as you may think, and the terrain actually blends in somewhat seamlessly with the surroundings. From this perspective, we can also see many key landmarks like Bald Mountain and the edge of Oxenfurt. It really doesn't feel like we're out of bounds. Under the map now, we can see the ruins from the final section of the quest. I never even considered the possibility of this area being positioned like this, but it actually makes a lot of sense to help sell the look of a pocket dimension type scene. As we saw earlier, the house literally clips through the terrain to connect the two places. Here we can see the hallway that Geralt eventually falls through to end up in the final room. Once I move the camera closer to the ruins, the skybox changed to the usual red and misty version we're used to. And just past some random staircases, we can see one of the many mirrors you have to break to eventually solve Gaunter's riddle. Looking closer at the actual ruins, there is a lot that you can't normally see when playing regularly. There are many examples of staircases intertwining randomly in hallways that the player would never be able to see. In the main area, we can see the central mirror, as well as the fountain and the hole in the wall that Geralt normally breaks to release the water and solve the riddle. We'll take an even closer look at this a little later. I've always thought this location's atmosphere is extremely unique compared to the rest of the game. CDPR obviously had to work around some engine or optimization limitations here, but this just proves that sometimes the most obvious solution ends up being the best one. It really feels like you're somewhere far away from reality and trapped in a world ruled by some godlike being. Fooled me at least, but that's not really saying much. Let's take a closer look on foot, shall we? Doing so actually turned out to be much easier said than done. If you try to access the area by going past the world boundary on foot, you quickly find yourself in another void far from reality. Not even a well-timed boat could save you here. The only way to access the area is by using a command in the debug menu connected to the Forgotten Worlds mod. As always, links on how to enable and access both of these are down in the description below. After loading in, though, you can most likely see the problem. While this is great if we wanted to just explore the underground portion, it appears we're completely blocked off from the overworld. Oh, I've seen worse odds in this game, as many of you know. Don't ask where Geralt's shirt went, he doesn't need it. But by making some precise jumps across these extruding branches, we can ultimately jump right into this pit, right onto this staircase, which leads us up and out of bounds to the top of the hallway we normally fall through. Now all we have to do is jump through some geometry and voila. Just go ahead and add another point to my total.
What the f was that?
There was one last problem though, as the backside of the house is separated by some invisible barriers. Don't worry about that either, just run to the back of the house, jump up on the roof, and slide down into the front lawn. Finally, let's take a look at this place. I looked around at multiple different times of day, the first being noon. Like the aerial view before, the location has a completely different feel, but I wouldn't say it becomes any less unnerving. It feels a bit like walking through a haunted house during off hours. On the left, we can see some ruins that I have never noticed. Like I said before, the time nature of this quest means there's not much downtime to really take in the surroundings to their fullest. However, what I do remember is this well, which, after approaching, we can see has the red outline as if we can inspect it. But for some reason, Geralt isn't interested in taking a closer look. I was though, but after using FreeCam, we can see there's nothing inside but broken parts and rocks. On the ground, the mist and pits are back to being intimidating. And just across this first bridge and to the right, we can see some more ruins before eventually climbing our way up to this broken pathway, where in the quest, Geralt encounters the apparition of Shani. Shani, that's honestly a pretty good Ada Wong impression. Using FreeCam, we can see that the path actually trails off past this rock formation. CDPR once again selling the illusion of a larger world by putting things just out of bounds. Across this next bridge, we can find the ruins with the two statues where, to my surprise, the Viper Sword is actually sitting in its normal spot. Whether or not this is a viable way to obtain it without saving Olgierd, I'll let you all be the judge. Past even more pits and closer to the mansion, we can see another landmark from the quest. This cave, which usually has a bright glowing aura, is actually kind of hidden during the daytime. Once inside, we can see that all the chests and containers still hold all their riches and distractions, and the sunlight is shining through from somewhere, completely taking away the creepiness factor. There's even statues of my two favorite enemies in the game. You know what every fan always says, we could really use some more wolves and panthers to fight. Hell, why not even 3 at a time? Before moving on to the mansion, we check out this swing outside the main gate. Like the well, it appears to be interactable, but Geralt's glasses must be too dark because he doesn't seem to see anything. Also, this thing must be made of pure obsidian or something, because no matter how many times you hit it with art, it barely even budges. In the front graveyard now, it looks like Geralt's been hard at work already with his shovel, and we can also take a look inside this crypt to find this very unnerving face in the stone. Through the main gate and into the courtyard, I expected the actual interior of the house to be blocked off, possibly a quest trigger, but to my surprise it opened with no issue. Inside, we can find that Gaunter tried to distract Geralt with alcohol, but if he was actually smart, he would have hosted a Gwent tournament instead. We can also see that, like Olgierd, Gaunter also keeps a freakishly large taxidermied bear in his living room. Just down the stairs, we enter the hallway I mentioned earlier, but after anxiously walking through, nothing seems to happen. The mirror stays completely intact. Here's a quick reminder of what happens normally during the quest. So now we have the same issue as earlier, but in reverse. Luckily, I saved earlier, so we can go back down with no issues. The final ruins look almost the same as when playing the game normally. The one major difference being that the skybox or background elements seem not to have loaded in completely, as we can see all of the clipping terrain in the distance. After approaching the first mirror, we find that like the one in the hallway, it doesn't shatter when we get close. This is to be expected as their trigger is most likely tied to the hallway collapsing, which of course never happened. There are also many areas which appear to be blocked off. From what I remember, they open up as you shatter the mirrors. Taking a look at the hole in the wall, we can actually use Ard to knock it down, but no water flows out this time. Next to the fountain, we can find the moss that Geralt inspects to find the water in the first place. He does crouch down to take a look, but his voice lines don't trigger. I tried for a while to reach some of the higher staircases despite the blocked passages, and I actually managed to hit this, interesting jump up to one of the other mirrors. I really wanted to get a closer look at this one beyond this balcony, but after trying some sketchy out-of-bounds parkour, I decided to take the safe route and use free cam. This mirror now has a very interesting backdrop, which makes me again wonder how CDPR covered all this clipping terrain in the final build. We can see the winding staircases from earlier, and it really gives me a sort of Dark Souls type vibe for some reason. I don't know, maybe I've just got Anor Londo on the mind. Someone back me up here. After the initial look around, I was curious what changes at nighttime. At midnight, the area seems to be stuck in this in-between situation as the sky eventually changes to its usual red color, but many of the other lighting effects don't seem to be active or effective yet. This slightly brighter but still red version has a unique eerie feeling to it, and it doesn't help that the ambiance plays in the background without the OST. Just listen to how unsettling this is. The combination of the moon, red sky, and now illuminated house makes for a really nice environment overall. There are a lot of photo mode opportunities here now that there's no timer to worry about, so I recommend trying this out for yourself. After some time had passed, the moon moved further down and the sky instantly darkened. You can see the immediate effect this had on the place. CDPR's intended version definitely has the most intimidating atmosphere by far. At this time, the cave's lighting effects also seem to be working, and now that the sun is gone, the inside is way more on theme. Now that we have the ability to walk through the gates and approach the mansion at a normal pace, you get this feeling of apprehension that wasn't present in a normal playthrough. Because players are more focused on the many hostile spirits and constantly ticking countdown, I feel as though they miss the true sense of dread that comes from immersing yourself in this area. Exploring it alone and hearing nothing but crunching footsteps, the howling wind, and occasional crows makes it feel like you need to look over your shoulder or turn a light on. I'm glad that by returning to this area out of sequence, we can gain a new appreciation for the attention to detail and effort that went into creating such a confined and chilling area of a game that is usually vast and full of opportunity. I'm honestly starting to think Olgierd got the better end of the deal. This brings our lengthy reflection on my Witcher 3 discovery up to this point to an end. For now, at least. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope this was a nice break from the real world for a while, as I know for myself at least, I need more than a fair share of vacations from reality, especially lately. Whatever it was you were doing or trying to get done with this in the background, even if it was just getting a couple hours of rest, I sincerely hope you were able to make some progress. Things really stack up in life in an instant, that much I know, but always know that little by little, even if it appears your boat is stuck in a wall, things will get better. It's actually helped me a lot to see you all in my comments section, live chat, and Discord all sharing great ideas and, for lack of a better word, just being human. This community means a lot to me for that reason, and countless others that I'm reminded of every day. So thank you for being a part of it, and I promise to do my very best to create things that bring us all together and allow us to enjoy the things we are passionate about, and take a break from all those lame responsibilities and real-world stuff for a while. With the newly announced Witcher 3 expansion on the way, I have a lot planned for this channel, so be sure to stay tuned and consider subscribing or joining the Discord to stay up to date and connect with other delusional boat enjoyers. Until next time, thank you all once again so much for watching, and I wish you the best for whatever YouTube autoplay has up next for you. Take it easy, everyone.